Do you ever feel like you're living through the turning point in a science fiction movie? The fork in the road where humanity's future gets rerouted? Every day we're being herded closer towards disaster, but the weapon driving us over a cliff isn't a gun, it's language. This is about how politics twists our words to shape a new reality, and whoever wins the war over meaning rules the world. We're in a race against time. If enough of us see this process in action, can we avoid the disaster mapped out for us? Or will we carry on sleepwalking as surplus labour, that's us, to be cold in wars, disease, in poverty? How have we sophisticated Westerners been so thoroughly duped by a class that, to put it mildly, doesn't have our best interests at heart? It's a real brain twister. How is the media, which is supposed to defend us against the governing executive's more malign objectives, able to regurgitate the state script with such a straight face? As our capitalist system grinds into its late stage and breaks down like an old car due for the breaker's yard, it increasingly deforms language, the collective communication tool vital for humans to function as a society. More and more of us are seeing this happen every day. In every news report, in every mainstream analysis. How many of us end up shouting at the telly? It's really not good for our blood pressure. Remember, knowledge is power. You might say making visible the invisible is a revolutionary act. For the sake of our sanity and our survival, we need to get a grip on events and know what it is that we're seeing. The further capitalism collapses, the more outrageous is the attempt to cling on to power in our Potemkin village of democracy. The elite establishment has always massaged meaning for its own interests, but now it's battering us with an outright hijacking of meaning in order to protect itself in the endgame. Mass manipulation of cognition is only going to get worse with artificial intelligence. So let's take stock of where we are. It wasn't only Joseph Goebbels who, leading up to World War II, latched onto the importance of social engineering through propaganda. He infamously said that the big lie becomes the truth with repetition, something we see permeating the media today. The chief one we've all seen in the past few years is, "It's not genocide. Don't believe what your lying eyes are telling you." Thankfully, that lot lost the war. Phew, what a relief we're safe from that manipulation. Clever us. However, the Madison Avenue-based advertising industry picked up the propaganda baton and ran with it. Advertising advanced Goebbels' practice in post-war America's vibrantly expanding economy, invisibly and stealthily, creeping up on us when we were drunk on all the stuff we could buy. So much choice. The major pillar of post-war capitalism used an army of psychologists to hypnotise a nation of consumers into a highly profitable system of fear and desire. It sold war every bit as effectively as it sold washing machines, and both at the same time. Then postmodernism arrived, dressed in black and smoking a Gauloise cigarette. It took propaganda even further, philosophically codifying a declining capitalism's need to change the way we see reality. In the 1960s, empire intellectuals led the charge against 400 years of science and evidence-based enlightenment and argued that reality is constructed in language. There was no objective, concrete reality that you could prove and interrogate with scientific methods. It's all in your mind. How's your head, mate? Lovely. How's yours? Centuries of challenging superstition, faith and blind belief through observable phenomena was under attack. Still, it's an ill wind that blows nobody any good. The rejection of Marxism by this strand of intellectuals made them essential allies in maintaining the power status quo. Money, fame and glory. What more could a fashionable intellectual about town desire? Capitalism will eat itself. Why was the philosopher Karl Marx such a threat to the post-war liberal order? And why did he inspire so many of the world's poor? Marx had investigated the capitalist system within which we exist in the spirit of the Enlightenment. He attempted to apply scientific method to make visible the invisible mechanisms of capitalism in his book Das Kapital and other writings. In demystifying the process, he came up with the tools to enable us to look under the hood and strip it down to see how it worked. The beneficiaries of the system had always presented capitalism as productive for everyone, a perennially benign dynamo benefiting humankind forever. However, Marx concluded, while it was positive in its early form, releasing a lot of productive energy for the good of human society and giving us a lot of affordable stuff, it also divided society into two contending classes: the proletariat, whose labour produced wealth, and the bourgeoisie, who owned the means of production and fed off the workers, always paying them less than their labour was worth. This surplus value was their profit, and the profit motive lay at the core of everything they held dear, if not inordinately expensive. Unfortunately, this process ran in ever-diminishing cycles until the system would inevitably run out of juice. So, not only was capitalism built on the expansionist ravages of imperialism, it featured an inbuilt entropy that would prove predatory and also destructive as it struggled to maintain itself. This could be summed up as capitalism contains its own gravedigger, or, as the T-shirt says, capitalism will eat itself. Marx's theory had gained traction in the post-war liberal order of the American age, and not only in socialist systems with communist aims. It provided an alternative for emerging third world nations which were being plundered by the West, and for the exploited proletariat whose surplus labour was extracted by the bourgeoisie in the form of profits. At the peak of the capitalist cycle, empire might be doing a wily coyote over a cliff, hovering over a chasm and losing its hegemony. So there's a CIA romance with postmodernism that comes up. Out of the depths of the Cold War sprang an intellectual saviour of the state, wielding the sword of words and the shield of language games. See what I did there? The father of postmodernism, Jean-Francois Lyotard, argued in his 1979 book The Postmodern Condition, A Report on Knowledge, that meta-narratives such as truth, science and philosophy, like Marxism, fragment into smaller and smaller narratives until they are effectively rendered meaningless. Unsurprisingly, as French intellectuals rolled over and defected to the state's core defenders, the CIA, fell in love with postmodernism. Why not? Postmodernism gave birth to a battalion of nerds drilling down relentlessly, arguing why black is in fact white. With French philosophers in the driving seat of the culture wars, such as Michel Foucault, Jacques Lacan, Jacques Derrida and Roland Barthes, and American literati in the rear describing the process, postmodernists took Swiss structuralist Ferdinand de Saussure's semiotic division of the basic unit of language, the sign, and smashed up meaning. As if splitting the atom into its component parts, they stripped signifier, representation, from signified, concept, words from meaning, and shattered coherence until a Babelesque confusion of tongues beckoned. We can now look at the reigns of perception, heaven, hell, and hyperreality. Jean Baudrillard privileged the signifier and created hyperreality, where whoever has the means of production can grasp the reins of perception. Hyperreality fed into the CIA's mind control interests, blurring the lines between reality and simulation. It placed paranoia on the same level as concrete phenomena, as we can see in the construction of political narratives today. Any opinion, once expressed, is given equal weight to provable, fact-based reality. To give a concrete example, so the chief of the Better Cotton Initiative, who is also head of Supima, the marketing arm of the American cotton industry, can allege forced labour of Uyghurs in Xinjiang on no evidence, and the media will report it as true. Likewise, data abuser and right-wing Christian zealot Adrian Zenz can claim 1 million Uyghurs in Xinjiang prisons, extrapolated from 8 interviews, notoriously, and the BBC will publish it as the sole truth. And after a while, through repetition, it becomes the truth, just like Goebbels said. There is, however, a concrete reality to contend with. As much as they might deny it, objective truth still exists. As someone once said, if you threw Leotard into the sea, he'd still get wet. By keeping an eye on the contradictions as they emerge, you test and challenge the enormous mindfuck being perpetrated against the human race, as the predator class tries to disguise itself as something benign. Oh, Grandma, what big teeth you have! All the better to scramble your brain. Few can miss that we find ourselves firmly entrenched in the capitalism will eat itself stage of the game. Little works for the people, that which does is swiftly cannibalised for the benefits of the top elite. Elon Musk's Doge escapades in the US are a crude example of the system eating itself. Another one is pauperising workers by sacking them, while Trump's billionaire backers like Charles Schwab make even more billions overnight from his tariff mayhem. Britain gifting billions to the defence industry via the West's proxy war in Ukraine and NATO, while slashing support for the weakest that capitalism left behind, is another case in point. It's growing difficult to move without tripping over ever more examples as the decaying West goes belly up. The establishment creates crisis and chows down on the resulting chaos in ever more violent waves. Meanwhile, its tame media perpetrate invisibility of the workings of the system by distraction, outright lies, and a subtle Orwellian distortion of language. There are so many examples of language games flooding the zone in service to the ruling monsters. Where do we start? The liberal media, such as The Guardian and the BBC, are among the worst exponents, as they have a ton of enlightenment to undo. And this hurts me to say this because I used to write for them before the pivot to Asia, when Chinese dissident thought really wasn't a welcome thing. After World War II, Europeans and Americans were the best educated and informed populations in the world. They had mass access to an Alexandrian library worth of books, information, philosophy, arts, sciences and humanities. For every savage manifestation of the feral state, there was an opposite, if not equal, eruption of freedom and liberty, back when those terms actually meant what they said. We claimed traditions going back to the 17th century Enlightenment and even ancient Athens. How do you unravel all of that and get the population on track? It would take a humongous ideological pivot to sell willing blindness to the plebs. So we get language games in action, repetition of a lie becoming the truth. Most of us by now have noticed how rules-based order replaced international law in the post-war discourse. The honour goes to cuddly Barack Obama, who started hammering away at it at around the time of his pivot to Asia. International law is thrashed out collectively over time by reasoned argument. Rules-based order is imposed by raw power. So it's not just Trump who was doing it, it actually predates Trump. Similarly, Taiwan independence actually means in practice dependence on the hegemon via huge sales of weapons, Pentagon support, funding, movies, TV, and as one US government website puts it, a robust, unofficial relationship. Just as mother is turned into a dirty word in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, so woke becomes a trigger for hate. Although when you ask why being aware instead of asleep is so bad, no one can offer an adequate explanation. Aggression is a much abused term, repeatedly applied to the country defending itself from empire predations, and never the one with a track record for aggro. For example, aggression, used with abandon beyond satire in Israel's claims that Iran attacked them the other year, even though the strikes were a response to Israel attacking first when it bombed the Iranian consulate in Damascus in April. Well, that's one example. China defensively beefs up its military, while the US spends more on its military-industrial complex than the next 10 countries put together, while pouring arms into Taiwan, interfering with elections and surrounding China with hundreds of bases. Yet it is China's sensible response in making sure it is no laggard in self-defence that's depicted as aggression. It's defined as initiating action rather than effect following cause. The crucial context of America waging non-stop wars, in contrast with China not having fired a shot in 40 years, is wiped. The word unprovoked is another one. It peppers press reports whenever an attacked country responds. Oh, it's unprovoked, it's unprovoked. Yeah, sure. Whether you condemn or support Russia's military incursion into Ukraine in 2022, the conflict effectively started the minute the USSR fell in 1991 and was far from unprovoked. It didn't start on 24th of February 2022. And that's information that should be public and discussed for any discourse to be meaningful. But instead, it's verboten. Jim Baker's 1998 or 1999 promise to Gorbachev, not an inch eastwards, talking about NATO, well, these are words that don't mean a thing anymore. Victoria Newland's fuck the EU do, and they certainly did. Perhaps the most egregious example of institutional truth-twisting is how Western media such as the BBC misreport Israel's attack on the Gaza Strip. The liberal media continue to bland out mass murder and starvation because despite the ceasefire that's supposed to be going on, I think to date there have been something like 400 Palestinians killed during that time. George Orwell at least gave us the tools to interrogate the twisted language of dictators. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. Britain appeared to use his dystopian novel 1984, written in 1948, as a manual rather than a warning, even renaming the Ministry of War as the Ministry of Defence in 1964. It's been quite amusing to see Trump actually reverse this by calling their Ministry of Defence what it actually is, a Department of War. Today, 4 decades after the setting of 1984, AI is hard at work. OpenAI, Oracle, Palantir, Cambridge Analytica, Microsoft, Carbine, Black Cube and Pegasus are some of the outfits connected with Israel and its interests and which control our social media. This is what our most liberal institutions have helped usher in, and this is what will shape our perception as we are herded into cattle pens or over a cliff. I'd just like to point out that none of my stuff is AI. None of it is written by AI. I've seen a lot of that around, and this is all me. I'm proud to say something that's mediated by my experience and my imagination and my intellect. And I think that's something that we really need more of. If you like what you've seen, please like and subscribe. Thank you.